I'm now at an age where I can say I've played video games over the course of the majority of my life. During that time, my experience with the hobby, or that relationship I should say, has changed many times. I've gone from playing just story-focused and 3D platformer games like I was getting paid to when I was a little kid, to playing exclusively online multiplayer, all the way to not playing any games at all for quite a few years as I moved on to other hobbies, feeling like I'd grown out of video games, only to eventually go back to playing them, and at first socially, just to keep in touch with friends, and then full circle back to playing them as often as I could and growing to take them very seriously, perhaps more seriously than I ever had before. I fell in love with video games pretty much the very instant I was made aware of them. When I was little, a couple of my cousins used to take care of me while my parents worked. One of them had a Game Boy Color. It was the transparent green, and on it they let me play Pokemon Blue, which is the first game I have any memory of playing. Eventually, when I got my own Game Boy, the silver Game Boy Advance SP, they very generously gave me that copy of Pokemon Blue, which I still have both that copy of the game and that Game Boy on my shelf here behind me. I remember waking up early just so I could start playing games as soon as I could, not even with an alarm or anything. I'm pretty sure I developed an internal clock so I could wake up earlier than everyone else in the house just to get some solo game time in. I would play before having to go to school, and I would rush through homework just so I could start playing again. Now I realize how that sounds, and don't worry, I wasn't hopelessly addicted, so before you take to the comments to say that I had bad parents who didn't regulate how much I was playing, know that I did manage to balance all that screen time with playing outside. I was lucky enough to have a little brother who liked most of the things that I did, and a friend who lived just a couple houses down the street, so we'd run around, ride bikes, and skateboard, and play outside like all healthy, active children should. As I've looked back on how I've played games, I've been genuinely surprised by how much it has changed. Before writing the script for this video, if I was asked about my relationship with gaming, I'd probably have said I'd always loved them and always played them. However, with thinking harder and really thinking about the timeline that is that relationship, I've been almost alarmed by how different that has looked over the course of my life, and even more so by how much it has changed just within the last few years, really. Like I mentioned, there was a period of time after graduating university that I was playing games very casually and really only to keep in touch with friends. As we had all moved to different places and could rarely see each other in person anymore, that was the way that we hung out, I guess. As we as a friend group played less and less together as we got older, I kept playing very casually and eventually got back into single-player games. In 2021, I played 15 games over the course of the whole year, across both Xbox and Switch. Part of that being a replay of the original Doom and Doom 2, which I replay the original Doom probably every other year at this point, so I feel like that doesn't even really count. And in 2022, I played another 15 games. 5 of those games took 5 or less hours to beat each, but I also put in over 200 hours into Elden Ring, because I, like many others, simply couldn't put it down. It became another temporary obsession, which resulted in me eventually looking up a bunch of YouTube videos on the game, lore, builds, and plenty more, which led to a rabbit hole of about 50 other random topics on YouTube, naturally. One of those many videos was A Misguided Guide to Finishing Your Backlog by Daryl Talks Games, where he talks about all the games that he's accumulated over the years and others that he hasn't but still wants to play, and how he organizes them all in a spreadsheet and plans to play as many games as he can in an effort to actually complete his backlog. I won't tell you how it ends because there are 2 follow-up videos to it, and it's an entertaining and very much worthwhile watch, so if you haven't already seen it, a link will be in the description. I found his video a combination of motivating in making me want to play the many games that I had myself accumulated over the years, and interesting almost as an experiment as to whether or not one really could finish their backlog using this method, kind of a true test of patience, focus, and probably most importantly, willpower. And I also found it challenging in the sense that I knew I had a lot of games that I hadn't even touched despite having for years, yet I never considered putting in any effort to put a list together, or a schedule or a spreadsheet of any kind, to make sure that I actually played them. Unfortunately for me, there was another video that would equally motivate me and challenge me, in a completely different way, however. The Top 10 and a Half Best Games of 2021 by Jacob Geller. Right at the beginning, he makes a statement that, to some level at the time, blew my mind. Right at the start, he opens by saying that he played over 50 games throughout the year. 50. For me, who had only beaten 15, and another 15 the year before, and probably way less than that the year before that, that number of games in 1 year seemed astronomical, unattainable. I doubt I beat that many games in the last 4 years combined. It was also around this time that I had started considering starting my own YouTube channel, and video games were always the subject that I had in mind to focus on. With that, these two videos kind of acted as the initial stepping stones for the process for me. I had this new motivation to not only play more games, but play more games within the duration of the year, during which I would keep track of the games I was planning to play and wanted to play, through which I could also organize my notes for each and the total number of games completed. I went from having played 15 games a year to having played over 40 in 2023. Unfortunately for both my backlog and my wallet, literally none of those games on that list were games that I already had. For some unfathomable reason, I had completely disregarded the step of looking at my actual backlog, and instead I started fresh, creating a whole new one. But now with a nice and pretty spreadsheet to go alongside it. Every game I played that year either came out that year or was some indie game that I now had access to, as I also got a Steam Deck, and I didn't, and still don't, have an actual gaming PC. So all of a sudden I had an entire database, a whole library of games available to me that prior to then were completely unattainable, or at least unplayable. One problem with beating so many games in a year was that I simply didn't have the time to play that many full-length games. I played some, like Diablo 3 and 4, Metroid Prime Remastered, Starfield, and Lords of the Fallen, but in order to beat so many games in 1 year, I was intentionally seeking out shorter games. Many took less than 5 hours to beat, some being as short as just 2 or 3, and some even shorter still. With the addition of the Steam Deck to my arsenal, for which I felt I had to get games for, so I could actually use it, I bought way more games than I had any reason to. But I justified it with this self-imposed goal of playing as many games as I could, tracking each one. The next year, 2024, I beat just shy of 50. Over 50 games if you count games that I replayed or DLC, since I did another 4 full playthroughs of Lords of the Fallen, and the Diablo 4, Elden Ring, and original Doom expansions came out then as well. That year was largely the same as the previous. I played a lot of games that were short, quick to beat, and basic, almost rudimentary in some cases, basically just to add to the total game count. I also fully recognize how derogatory that is, but I will specify that I don't regret playing any of the games that I did. I'm glad that I played them, and by going through so many games so quickly, I do feel like it helped me get a better idea of what games I like, what I look for now, and what I can expect from certain types of games. I explored and tested genres that I never would have before or barely dabbled in, and I felt like it was a good overall experience, even though I did it all for very silly and almost entirely arbitrary reasons. It was weird. Having looked back and seeing the number of games I'd played over the few years prior, I almost felt guilty for how low the number was. Like, how can I justifiably say I like video games if I hardly play any? How can I start a YouTube channel that mostly talks about games if I only play a small handful each year? I hadn't played games that were considered classics or must-plays like Portal, Skyrim, Stanley Parable. I'd never even beaten a Mario or a Metroid game before then. Those couple years were almost like an experiment for myself, like a test. It got me to play a lot of games that I wouldn't have played otherwise, and it got me to play a lot of games in general, and support a lot of indie developers along the way. I went from playing just Call of Duty, Warzone, and Fortnite to having a shelf full of JRPGs, visual novels, and indie gems that I had never heard of before then, nor would I have considered getting had I not tried out so many new genres and styles of games. However, it also got me to realize that I was in a rush for nothing, and under pressure from no one. At least, no one but myself. Last year, 2025, was very different than the 2 previous years. I played and completed a total of 27 games, and most of them were longer titles, ranging from 10 to 30-hour runtimes. Of course, there was still a good number of shorter games that only took a few hours to complete, but nothing like the numbers from the previous years. I was spending more time with the games that I was playing, not just because the runtimes required it, but because I was taking my time while playing them. I was allowing myself to get more immersed and absorbed into the worlds that I was exploring. Not that I never let that happen, but I noticed it more when I wasn't immediately going from one game to the next, treating it like an item on a to-do list. I still had the list, of course, and I had games that I was planning to get to that I hadn't yet, but I no longer pushed myself to rush through a game because I was letting myself experience what I was playing in the moment. I do still have a habit of playing only the main quest lines, although I've noticed that changing slowly too, even if it's very slowly. But I'm pretty sure that's just my personality type. I tend to be very objective-oriented, and I like to think part of that comes from the immersion, or at least I tell myself that to make myself feel better. If I'm playing a game and I'm told that the fate of the world lies in my hands, I'm going to take care of what I need to do as quickly as possible and as thoroughly as possible, no matter how appealing the fishing minigame is. Because I know that no matter how many fish I catch, it's not going to help me save the world. Just a hypothetical example, of course, but I'm sure you know exactly what I mean, as that could be applied to a staggering number of games. To add to that, I do find myself slowing down more and more as I continue to play without the self-imposed rush or arbitrary number of games per year to check off. I have slowly found myself doing more side quests, and exploring more, and wanting to replay more games. Like I mentioned, I beat Lords of the Fallen 6 or 7 times in total, I think, and I would absolutely love to keep playing it, especially with all the additional updates. I played Wuchang Fallen Feathers twice, back to back, and would really like to get the additional endings for that as well. I also recently finished Stellar Blade, and that game had me absolutely on lock. A rare instance where I, in fact, did disregard all responsibilities, in-game of course, so I could just go fishing and run around collecting cans. Also, when Lords of the Fallen 2 comes out, I am entirely confident that it's going to be the same story over again. And by that I mean, I am fully prepared to completely ignore every other game that I have on my list, or that comes out around the same time, just so I could play that on repeat. Also, side note, I was working on a video covering Lords of the Fallen 2023 for quite a while, and as I mentioned in another video, I wrote a quarter of the script, maybe a third, and a test read of just that portion was over 2 hours long. However, and this isn't a complaint, the developers all of a sudden decided they weren't done updating the game, and have continued updating it as recently as just a few weeks ago from me starting to write this script. So I feel like it's too late for me to do that video now, especially with the sequel coming out so soon. So I do apologize if that's a video that you were looking forward to. I was really excited to make it and put a lot of time into what I had for it, so let me know if you still want to see that video, if you don't think it's too late, or if you think I should wait and eventually do a retrospective after the sequel comes out. I'm leaning towards the retrospective personally, but let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. Back to the main topic, another thing is that I admittedly have an unfortunately poor memory, and while I've taken notes on all the games that I've played, I hardly remember a good number of them without having to look at my notes first. The ones I do remember are the longer ones, and the ones that I spent the most time in. Surprise, surprise. I know almost everyone with access to the internet these days suffers from the dreaded temporary paralysis that is the doom scroll, and I'm certainly no exception. And looking back at how I was playing games, it's almost like I had applied that same doom scrolling behavior, that mindset, to how I was playing games. My dwindling attention span and bad habit of mindless scrolling and repeat dopamine hits in rapid succession had permeated into my hobby of gaming. Every game finished was a box I could check and line that I could add to the spreadsheet. It wasn't deep experiences that had the potential to change my outlook or impact me on a greater or emotional level that I was looking for. There was nothing to contemplate or reflect over, and sometimes it was just a simple and easy game that I could beat quickly. It was just a task to be completed, so I could get on to the next one. Now that I'm slowing down and not rushing and not counting the number of games played the way that I was before, I'm finding the experiences that I have with each game are deeper and more meaningful, even for the short games that I've played. I still feel like I'm remembering those better, and I'm playing those slower too, and finding more within them to appreciate. I find myself more attentive and more present and more curious too. It's honestly crazy how quickly and easily the way that we play games can be influenced by other things around us. And on top of that, how much our experience playing games can be impacted by how we play them, and even the simplest of an addition. just an external context like a spreadsheet or a checklist. I guess this was just an excessively long and drawn-out way of saying you don't have to play a lot of games. You don't have to play games that are considered must-plays or classics. You don't even have to play the games that you already bought if you don't want to play them anymore. Again, that's what I did. I started tracking games I played and completely forgot about all the games that I'd already bought, all of which had been collecting digital dust for years. And I've come to terms with that. I've accepted that. And I'm comfortable with just moving on, playing what I want to now, when I want to. And I'm enjoying not only the games themselves a lot more, but I'm also enjoying seeing the changes in my attitudes and perspectives towards them, and the hobby as a whole. There is no backlog. There's only what you're playing right now, or what you want to play right now. So just focus on that. You don't need to look ahead at what's coming out soon or what else you have on your list to hurry up and get to it. And honestly, I'm saying that more as a reminder for myself than anything else, because it's still easy for me to get distracted by the new games that are coming out and think about what else I could be playing, instead of just enjoying what I'm playing right now. So how do you play games? Have you ever felt pressured to play certain games or a certain number of games like I did? What are some changes you've seen in yourself and how you play over the years compared to how you play now? I hope you enjoyed and found this all interesting or at least entertaining. But if nothing else, I hope it served as a reminder for you to play what you want to play, how you want to play, and to try to steer clear of the external pressures and influence of media, and in some cases, internal pressures. There are so many games that you must play, and so many games coming out all the time that I know a lot of people feel pressured into getting them so they don't miss the hype, FOMO and all that good stuff. So don't forget to slow down, because it's all right to take your time. And that applies to gaming just as much as it does to anything else in life. So again, don't forget to slow down. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time.